Welcome to another episode of the Pilot Talk podcast by OSM Aviation with Captain Michelle Truskin and myself, Stein Mjotveit, two commercial pilots and flight instructors with a shared passion for aviation and the aviation industry. The Pilot Talk podcast is made with the ambition to inspire, educate, and entertain you, our beloved listeners who either share our passion for flying or simply want to get a peek behind the cockpit door. In this podcast, we'll discuss flying, flight training, career advice for pilots, and other interesting topics from the exciting world of aviation. And in today's episode, Michelle, what is the topic?
The topic will be ferrying an aircraft from point A to point B. We're going to talk about the operations, the setup, the consequences, the decision-making. We got two subject expert pilots that are going to be on the show. Captain Robert Anderson, and Captain Gray Cooper, not Gary Cooper, not the actor, Gray Cooper. Both Canadians, highly experienced, ex-Middle East pilots that flew for a big Middle Eastern company. So they're going to be on the show. I can't wait to talk to them. It's going to be interesting. So stand by.
Yeah, this episode's going to be great. We hope you like it.
You are listening to Pilot Talk by OSM Aviation.
Welcome to the Pilot Talk podcast, Gray and Robert. How are you guys?
Doing good. How are you doing?
We're doing good. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. We're very, very excited to talk about today's topic. But before we get started, it'd be great for our listeners to learn a little bit more about who you are, how you got into aviation, and maybe you'd like to start, Rob. Just give us a little bit of background.
Well, I started 30 years ago, Stein and Michelle. I went to Air Cadets. After Air Cadets, I went to Red Deer College to get an aviation diploma. And I was actually fortunate enough that we were teaching Air Cadets. So as I was going through college, I was able to get instructor rating. From there, in Canada, instructor rating is like a good avenue to get you started on towards your path towards an airline career. I went flying up northern Canada. I did that for 3 years. Then eventually worked my way down to the airline business. I started with an airline called Greyhound Air in the 90s. Then I went to Air Transat late 90s, which Air Transat brought me to Etihad out in the Middle East. And now I just came back to join Air Canada, and we're starting up, Gray and I, our own little business, ferrying aircraft around the world, hopefully.
Beautiful. Nice career. Congratulations.
Yeah, that's exciting. And you, Gray, what about you? What got you into this industry?
What got me into this industry? Well, following Rob's a tough thing to do, but for me, it's kind of like I'm kind of a child of the aviation world here. A lot of people in my family are involved. My dad's a pilot, and my cousin is also a pilot. So I was living in Yellowknife, and I lived right on the bay, and all the float planes used to land and take off in front of my house all the time. And I had two pilots living in my basement. One of them was my cousin, and one of his batchmates. So I kind of symbiotically became involved just by being around and not realizing that was just a way of life for me growing up. When I got a bit older, I started working on the ramp and loading airplanes on the ramp. And then I became a dispatcher for a company called Airwave Transport. And that's when I decided that maybe this is something I'd like to do. When I got into grade 10 and 11, I was like, well, I either have to start doing something serious for life, or I could fly airplanes. And I decided that maybe I should fly airplanes because that sounds a lot better than doing something else. And then I started getting my pilot's license in Markham Airport at that point. And Markham's a small strip just about an hour northeast of Toronto. Yeah. And got my license there and ended up getting my first job flying a Caravan for a small company called Primac that flew cargo around Ontario. So that's how I started that. And then I ended up doing that for about a year. And then my father and I decided that we could start a small charter business together. And I started a small charter business with him, chartering a Cheyenne and 2 Navajos. We did that for a little bit and learned the ropes there. And then I got the opportunity to interview with a company called Gulf Air over in the Middle East in Bahrain. And I started flying 320s there and kind of worked my career from there, doing 320s, 330s. I got on the Embraer and the 340. And then I went over to Etihad, and that's where Rob and I passed across and kind of met each other at Etihad and developed our friendship. And that's where we are now, back at Air Canada together and ferrying airplanes around.
Cool.
Oh, wow. That's, you guys have been around, to say the least.
Yeah, no kidding, eh?
Yeah.
It's all in the family for Gray. Well, great. Congratulations. Nice career again for you, there, Gray, and both of you. Like Stein said, man, very nice. Well done.
Definitely. And it's so how did this idea come to be, Gray, that you and Rob wanted to start ferrying planes around?
To be honest, the idea of ferrying airplanes was kind of always there for me anyways, because I know a few guys that have done it before with different types like Convairs and Gulfstreams and stuff. When I was a dispatcher, there's a couple guys that were always doing it. And the base for work, like there's another ferry company that actually is based in Toronto that when I was working on the ramp that always kept their office. So that idea was always there, like if I needed something. But over in the Middle East, there was no requirement for it because you're always busy. And as Michelle knows, like you're constantly busy. Like you don't have any time off.
Absolutely. No, that's right.
Now with my job at Air Canada, like I have a lot more time off than I had before. I don't fly the line anymore. So I'm kind of like lucky that way. And then with the recent COVID situation, obviously money's become an issue for everyone. And let's not mince words here. Like me and Rob are we're in a stressful, more of a stressful situation, but we have a unique set of skills and experience that a lot of guys in our situation don't have. So we kind of were like, hey, like this is a good opportunity. A friend of mine contacted us and said, would you be interested in doing this? And we knew that this was a really exciting thing. Not all pilots really want to do this kind of work, but for us, I don't want to speak for Rob, but I think Rob would agree that it's an exciting challenge that is slightly different than the average line flight, but is uniquely fits with our skill set. So we really enjoyed it, and you get paid for what you do too. So why not?
Yeah, it's good money, and it's also exciting because every time you do a ferry, it's always somewhere that you've never been before as well.
Yep, definitely. It never been. Also, you have different challenges that you won't have on a line flight. There's less. It's almost like going back and like flying a small airplane again. Like you have less support from the operator. You're handling things on your own. You're making sure.
Dispatch and all stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, you take away all the things that can bother you, and you just get to operate an airplane.
That's right. That's true. Right on. And
Okay.
go ahead, Stein.
I think our listeners would love to hear more about, what are the differences between ferry flying and just operating for an airline? Like, what are the biggest challenges? What are the biggest differences? Could you guys get into detail about that a little bit more?
Go ahead, Rob.
Well, one of the biggest differences is the size of the organization and the experience of history, where usually in airlines, they've been around for quite some time. Where at OSM Aviation, this is one of the first ferry flights that we had the privilege of working with them. So it's actually starting from the ground up. So we're all working together for this one goal, and some of these dogs are barking. And for one goal to get the job done. So as you go around and do it, we're learning on the fly as we're going around. So mainly, from what I see, is it's the excitement of starting something new, and we're all learning together to achieve one goal, which is, to get the airplanes from point A to point B safely, efficiently, and on time for the customer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way of summarizing. That's the goal of every mission, right? And then I think the complexity that you guys are facing is changing all the time now, especially in today's environment with all the different regulatory responses to or the government actions to defend against the COVID-19 spread, and it's different from country to country. I mean, it's got to be a challenge and a new challenge every time you get a mission, depending on where you pick up the plane and where you go. Is that right?
I would definitely say so. Like, obviously, I think Rob summarized the basis of the differences between the ferry flights up pretty well. I mean, there's obviously some technical differences when it gets to legal responsibility and the type of ferry flight we're doing. We've with OSM, we've just done standard point A to point B to point C ferry flights with no special authorization. But you can have ferry flights that have special authorization, that have parts on the aircraft that are broken, or you're not operating within the normal realm of the regular realm of an operational certificate. So that can be different. Me and Rob haven't done that with OSM yet, but that happens quite frequently. We've done that in my daytime job. That happens quite often. The other thing with the COVID is, you just don't know. Like when we went to Slovenia, the getting the airplane to Slovenia, as silly as this sounds, was never a really massive ordeal for Rob and I. With Rob's oceanic experience and over 17,000 hours of flying time and my background, getting there is not the end of the world. Yes, we're going to have a few bumps on the road and we're going to have to iron a few things out as we go, but we know that part is going to get done. Once you land, with COVID rapidly changing the environment of government policy, our concern was actually getting to Germany and getting out of the country. And are we going to be allowed across the border? What are they going to say to us? What documents do we need? Because it's one thing to read it on a website, but it's changing all the time, and you don't really know until you get there, especially with COVID.
Yeah, it's max flexibility, and it's the unknown. And I'm sure that the logistic was well taken care of by OSM for sure.
It was done amazingly well, and Michael was extremely diligent in making sure that we were taken care of. But it's one of those things where, like, that's where the fun starts, if you know what I mean, where you don't really have control over all the things that are going on the ground, and how a custom officer is going to handle you, and what the border patrol is going to say, how the hotels are going to handle you when you come in, is restaurants going to be open, all those little details. That's what's that's why this job, doing this kind of flying, is unique, and it requires a unique person, because you have to be super flexible and adaptable, and the kind of person that says, okay, well, this didn't work, let's do something different. And I think that's why OSM excels at it, is because they've got the right people planning it, and then they hire the right pilots to fill the void.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
I think it was interesting there, Greg, because I didn't even think about the fact that the part about restaurants. Yeah, you have the border crossings and all those things. You got to have your paperwork in order. You're not sure how you're going to be, greeted, or if it's going to work out the way it says on the website. But just a simple thing is like going out to have a meal, because you're out traveling, you got no place to cook. Is it going to be possible to go to a restaurant and get food? That's not a given anymore.
Even transportation for taxis and all like that, I mean, it's all that stuff things that we don't think about.
Well, with COVID-19, that is the most difficult thing that we actually had to deal with on the ferry flight. That's the unknown. Like, for us, the flying part that we've been doing forever is natural. The COVID, and with all the new restrictions, and with each country and state having their different regulations, every time you went from one country to another, there was different restrictions in place with social distancing. Some people more social distancing. Some places restaurants were open. Some places restaurants weren't open. We got into Graz, Austria, and we had a car from Slovenia, and somebody came up to us and asked, "What are we doing in Austria? Because we're not supposed to be there." Which is we were like a little startled as we were doing the drive-through at McDonald's just to get some food before continuing on to Vienna. It was just like, that was for me the biggest challenge of the whole ferry flight.
Yeah, absolutely. The ferry flight that you did, I'm sure the listeners would be curious to know exactly what the route was. It's I know it's from Toronto to Europe, right? The one that you did with for OSM?
Greg, do you want to take that?
Yeah, we took it from Toronto to Keflavik, and then Keflavik to Ljubljana in Slovenia. So the routing goes over. You take off out of Toronto, and you go over Eastern Canada and out towards the Goose Bay area, and then across the ocean into Keflavik. You have a fuel stop into Keflavik, short stop, less than an hour, refuel, get the weather, and check in with Michael, and then from Keflavik fly to Ljubljana, which is basically coming down through Scotland area, and then down through Europe and into Slovenia, over the Alps and into Slovenia. And we were pretty lucky that both days that we went going into Europe, beautiful weather, got to have a good view of the Alps and enjoy the sunshine when we arrived, because it was a lot warmer in Slovenia than it was in Toronto when we left.
For sure. Now this trip was a non-ETOPS and a non-RVSM flight, was it right? Was it not?
It was non-ETOPS, but we were RVSM.
Okay.
Yeah, so which helped us out for saving time and saving fuel. And we went pretty far north, basically on the blue spruce route, so we could stay in VHF contact with an ATC controller at all times.
All right. Okay.
And for the non-aviators or for the non-pilots listening, ETOPS is extended twin engine operations, right?
That's right.
Or this is a funny story. We actually flew. We bought a few new Cessnas for the flight school that when we opened it in Norway, and we had some of our instructors go over and pick them up and fly them across the Atlantic. And I told them it's going to be ETOPS, and they looked at me like, "What?" I go, "Yeah, the engine turns or the passengers swim." And I found that joke to be incredibly funny, but they did not laugh for some reason.
That's a good one. I love it. And RVSM is anything above flight level 290 to 41,000 feet. I think it's flight level 410, if I remember correctly. It's max.
See,
there's no way you could have flown over for a flight level 410 if you were non-RVSM?
No, I'm not. The 321, the max ceiling is 39,000 anyways, so we won't get up there. So, but yeah, if you go above 410, you get out of RVSM airspace. A lot of the private jets, they can get up to 45, 46, and have a totally different operation up there.
Yeah, uncontrolled airspace. Yeehaw.
Exactly.
If one more question that I'm curious, if I was a listener, if I'm a pilot and right now, I mean, it's pretty hard to get. A lot of people got laid off and all stuff. Is there special things that a pilot can do to get into the ferry flight operations?
Rob, you have anything on that?
Well, just like anything, it's actually networking, keeping in contact with anybody that you know in the business of aviation. Because, we're in the airline business. We have the endorsement and stuff, but we might know, say, somebody from Transport Canada through an acquaintance who can set us up with somebody else. And then with our experience, even though we don't have the direct contact, you can find work out there. So the most important thing, and it started for me like 30 years ago, it's always like networking, never burning any bridges, what we would say, as you're going along in your career, and always, like reaching out to your fellow colleagues in the aviation business just to say hello and keep in touch, because you never know, when you might need their help or they might need your help.
Yeah. Good answer. Thanks.
I would agree. The other thing, it also depends on what level you're at, right? Like, I find that, like, my background at Etihad was hiring and command development and all that kind of stuff. And what I always found was there's a lot of people that just have a resume, and you give a resume and it says, this is how many hours I have. Well, a lot of people have hours. A lot of people have different things, but it's making sure that you round out your skill set. I mean, a lot of pilots think that flying is the only thing that matters, and that's great if you're only looking to do typical airline flying, get into an airline, and that's what you need. You need those hours. But when you look at a resume and it's rounded out as far as, you know, you've done other things than fly airplanes, that could be a management course, a development risk assessment course, even volunteering for something different, which is a lot of people don't do as aviators. We don't volunteer for a lot of things. Volunteer to help out in the community center or a community leader. Those things, I think, are things that kind of cap off your resume that make them stand out compared to other people. Because as someone who's evaluated resumes before, if you're looking for someone with a minimum of, let's call it 2,000 hours, you're going to get 100 resumes like that. But to me, if I'm hiring for my company, what I want to see is a guy that, he's got the 2,000 hours. We can teach him how to fly an airplane. That's something that is expected. That's a must. Now, what kind of human being are we hiring? Do we have someone that loves his craft, that's developing himself as a person in and outside of the aviation environment? So obviously the contacts is super important. Rob hit that nail right on the head. Like, you need to network and make sure, but you also have to be, when your number's called, make sure that you're capable of being adaptable to do many different things. Which I think sometimes as aviators, we get pigeonholed into thinking we're only capable of one type of mission.
Line operations only.
Yeah, and if we start thinking left and right instead of straight ahead, we can open up a lot of doors for ourselves.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, that's a really good points.
Yeah, that's some great advice, guys.
Pilot Talk with Stein Mjotvid and Michelle Treskin.
I'm curious also to get into the nitty gritty, like the details. Let's take this journey that you did from Canada to Slovenia right now. What were the most sort of doubt-inducing moments? Where did you have to apply your, problem-solving and decision-making skills the most? And what surprised you along the way? And possibly also what just went a lot smoother than you thought? Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Good questions.
Well, great. Remember when we were in Toronto and we had, something as simple as the clock on. We have like two screens in the middle of the lower ECAM. And we were actually not going to be able to go until we could basically either get that clock fixed or, get it deferred through an MEL, which is a maintenance procedure. So right at the beginning, we needed to solve that. So we needed to use our resources between Gray and myself, our knowledge of our books, and also using the expertise of maintenance on the ground. So when you're willing to use all of those resources, then it's actually going to bring the problem solving. It makes it much more easier than just trying to rely, say, on your own experience. When you're willing to go and ask, put your hand up. Oh, we're having a problem with this. Can you guys help us out? Because this is what they do. This is their expertise. And then we all work together. And then we got that clock fixed. We got the reset done. And then actually after that, the flight went relatively smooth. We had amazing weather. We had good, teamwork, getting weather. We got weather in Keflavik, for the route. Destination, the weather was fantastic. I don't even know if we had a cloud in the sky, not even a bump. The only bad thing, we didn't have any passengers to enjoy it because it was a ferry flight on that day.
Did you have a good jet stream pushing you down?
Gary, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, I'd just like to add on Rob's, and then I'll answer your question there, Michelle.
No props.
The interesting thing is, because my background, I'm doing a lot of these aircraft movements in my day job. So my expectation level for the flight was a lot lower than maybe Rob's when it comes to support and people helping us. Let's put it, that's a nice way to put it. I was very pleasantly surprised that when we did show up at the airplane, the maintenance engineers actually were really interested in making sure the airplane was in top quality. The airplane was a newer aircraft than Rob and I are kind of flying all the time. It's more of a newer generation 321. So I was very surprised that the condition of the airplane was really, really well, really good. And then when we did have an issue, this clock issue, the attention to detail that the engineers did pay because they could have basically not cared as much, and they didn't. They put a lot of effort and care, and it was a lot more organized than I thought. So for me, that was a bonus. I also was expecting the aircraft to be in a lot worse shape and more to go wrong en route. So we would have to use our experience and understanding of the aircraft systems and stuff more. We didn't have the airplane was in really tip-top shape, so we didn't really have any issues. So for me, I was kind of like expecting the worst, hoping for the best type thing, and it turned out to be the best, which was really good. Winds wise, we didn't really have very much wind on both the flights we've done. We didn't. It was, I think it was 30 knots, Rob, on the
high level winds.
Yeah, because we were going a little farther north, and then at that time of the year, the jet stream's going across Atlantic a little bit further south.
More south.
Yeah.
And you did a second trip as well, didn't you? So you landed in Slovenia, and how many days rest did you have before you had to come back and pick the other aircraft?
How many days were between? Well, once we land in Slovenia, that's the thing with this ferry flight. As we were alluding to earlier, that's where the fun starts. So basically, we started at 8. Departure time out of Toronto was 8 p.m. So we got there nice and early. We get there at 6 o'clock, and this is where the differences start. And when we talk about flexibility and ability to do different things, the day before we get told where to pick up the airplane, which is in a hangar on the north end, which is really interesting because I was explaining to Rob, that's where I used to load airplanes when I was 14 and 15 years old. So it's the same out of the same hangar. And we pick the airplane up there. And that's not really a big deal. But from an airline perspective, you always go into your operations center, pick up your flight plans, do a full briefing. When you're doing a ferry flight like this, no, you go to the airplane and you bring everything with you. And it's a different scenario. So we showed up at the airplane nice and early, did a thorough walk around, checked all the bays, checked the cargo bays, made sure there's nothing in the airplane, checked the bins, making sure no one left anything in the airplane. And that's when we start our pre-flight. Get all that done, 8 p.m., blast off, get into Keflavik. It's already a long night, 4+ to Keflavik, do an hour turn in Keflavik, and both of us are busy the whole time on duties on the ground, getting things done, making sure that we're dotting the I's and crossing the T's to make sure we don't miss anything. And then you get into Slovenia and you're tired. You've been up all night. You've had a 12-hour duty day. And then you hand the airplane over and you kind of get, I don't know, for me, I got you get this energy rush of, we completed this mission and we did a great job. What you don't realize is now you have to get through customs in Slovenia, which was very interesting because the guy basically came to us, took our passports, came back and said, okay, bye, which is an interesting scenario. I thought it would be a little bit more robust, but he seemed very relaxed. And then you get into a rental car, and that's where Rob's fear started because I was driving. And the roads are different. It's not for Europeans, it's not a big difference, but for us, the roads are a lot thinner. And finding out where to go, setting up the GPS, all those little things that you don't think of, we're doing. And it's not something you usually do. Usually you land the airplane, you say goodbye to the passengers, and you jump in a hotel bus or a bus provided by the company, and you're right at the hotel, and Bob's your uncle. In this scenario, we got another 2 hours to go to Graz. We're going to overnight in Graz, and it's 2-hour drive. Plus, we got to cross the border. So we got to make sure we have our documents there, and we don't really know how the border crossing is going to go. And, the first one, we kept it pretty clean and simple. We had to wait for the car for about an hour and a half. And even getting the car, you got COVID situations, so that there's no one at the airport waiting for you because they're not allowed to be at the airport. They have to come deliver the car. So that takes time. They have to clean the car. All these little details create time. So that's where for us, I think the risk was higher, was making sure we stayed awake during the drive to Graz and working together to make sure we didn't get lost, to be honest with you.
And then his navigator thought, he was smarter than the GPS system and said, we should go a different way, which actually brought us to a tunnel that was closed.
Well, I didn't realize there was so much work that had to be done, and a lot of things to anticipate, and the organization, and everything had to be just right, and like you said, doing the ad lib like you did. Once you're on the ground, it's almost like a free for all, and you have to use your skills and your knowledge and your intelligence and how to get to your next point. It's unbelievable.
No, but Greg, just let me say one thing. I've been flying for like 30 years, and there's so much of the decision-making skills and that I've learned through starting with 0 hours up into almost like 20,000 hours. Plus, I was an instructor and an examiner going that I use in my everyday life now, and that I look back, especially for decision-making. And we used in my previous life a decision-making module, which was called FORDAC. For like facts, options, risks, decision, execute, and then you go and at the very end you check just to make sure there's no other variables that come up, and which I always use in the airplane. But now on the ground, I use the same thing in my everyday life. That you can apply so many things that you learn in aviation, which is just to everyday living, to making sure you're making the right decisions in life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, 100%. And that's why it's super important, like when we're with the organization in OSM, and to have someone controlling it or overseeing it that has passion for it and understands the complexity of the operation, which Michael does. And then the people that you're working with, for me and Rob, is to have someone with you that you can rely on, because this can be done with a singular person making every decision. But usually when you make singular decisions, you don't have backups, and you can't rely on other people's experience. With Rob and I, what's nice is I can do one thing, he can do another thing, and then we come back into the middle and make sure we're both working together. So it makes it a lot easier. And it's interesting too. Like I find, like, when you're in a situation where you're making all these decisions, especially after landing and you're doing this and you're tired, you start learning from experience and what you've done before about how to control your emotional state, your stress level, all these little details about things that just getting the airplane there isn't enough. You have to do more than that. You have to get the airplane there, do it safely, effectively for the company, and then also for yourself. Be happy. I think people forget that. They get very frustrated about things that you can't get frustrated about, and it's learning about that, and that's why making sure you have good people with you is so important.
Yeah, well, you know what, Michael, OSM, I mean, they were your guardian angels, and they were with you all the way, and it worked out very well. And then what you said, and then your personal experience, fatigue management, stress management for the rest. I mean, it's a very, very hard mission to undertake and to complete perfectly without any problems. And you did very well. Yeah. Congratulations.
That struck me too when you guys were talking about this and how smoothly it went. I was thinking about another acronym. It's like proper planning prevents poor performance. And you sure must have done a great job of lining up all the ducks in a row for this to run this smoothly. And then I think also for some of the non-pilots listening, it'd probably be amazing or entertaining at least to hear that you soared across the world, no problems, and then you got lost in the car on a detour. That's a funny turn of events. It's like,
yeah, that's right.
That being said, that detour, see, and this is the interesting thing about flying and life in general. Sometimes the mistakes that you make are the best things that can happen, because when we did our detour, in the first flight we did, we went on the main highway the whole time. Kind of nice drive, but like it was what it was, right? It was a drive on a highway, basically. The first 30 minutes we were going through this town, and I honestly, Rob was gripping the seat because he thought I was going to hit every car on the side of the road. But the second trip, when the navigator made a slight error, we ended up going through. For the good, the navigator has to say. But we ended up having the best drive. I think that was one of my top 3 drives in my life, as far as going through the mountains, beautiful, small, tiny roads, just an amazing scene. And if you let all the little details upset you and get you emotionally upset, sometimes there's a saying that I like is don't forget to see the forest through the trees. Because you know that all those little things, that's what's going to happen in your life. You're going to have all these problems, and sometimes those problems can be gifts. And we had honestly, we were laughing. It was the second time we ended up driving another hour longer. We stopped, had a bite to eat, relaxed, but we had this amazing drive with a guy next to you that is your buddy. So it's a good thing. Sometimes the mistakes can be a good thing depending on how you take them.
That's right. It sounds like your drive was better than your flight.
More exciting.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, that's a lot of wisdom there.
Yeah. Brilliant. So the next one is not on the cards right now, but they're working on it.
Yeah.
Next one.
I'm hearing rumors that the destination is moving, and they're trying to find places to put the airplane and so on.
Yeah. This virus is not helping.
No, it's probably the only time in aviation where finding a place to put an airplane and moving an airplane is difficult. I mean, if you did this a year ago and you said, "Oh, I need to park an airplane somewhere," there'd be people asking you, "Please come park it at our place. We'd like to take care of your airplane." Now everything's full.
Yeah. Crazy. What do you see? Just a quick question about, we're talking about the virus real quick, but what do you see the aviation world being in the next 12 months? What's your take on that? Both of you guys.
Well, I'll speak first, Gray. Well, one thing that everybody continues to talk about is social distancing. They want 6 feet. But with aviation, there's going to have to be protocols in place where you can't give six feet. And the way I explain it to everybody, yes, they want to keep that middle seat clear. But how about the person who has the window seat? And that person on the window seat needs to go to the bathroom or just stretch his leg. He's going to have to cross over, the person who's in the aisle seat. And then if you want to go to the bathroom, you're going to walk either, to the forward of the aircraft or to the aft of the aircraft, where social distancing can't be in place. So they're going to have to come up with some sort of, protocol in place for aviation, which is different where when you're outside or in a mall where you can social distance. This is the biggest thing that I see is with the social distancing. We can all put a mask on. We can all wear gloves, but keeping that 6 feet social distancing, that's going to be the hardest part with aviation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you mean in terms of where the industry's going, Michelle?
Yeah, right now it's almost dead, and it's going to pick up again. I can see it picking up again. And what are the problems, and what do you foresee in the future?
For me, I'm a very methodical type person, so I view things in stages and steps. I think that it's going to obviously it's slowly opening up. If you look at Canada, for instance, a lot of the companies that are operating within Canada right now, they're seeing about a 5 to 10% increase every 2 weeks in load factors. So that's a good sign, but that's within Canada because we haven't opened up our borders. I try not to view the world too negatively, but not with rose-colored glasses either. I think it's going to be a struggle for the next 12 months. I think regardless of what happens, this is the first time in my lifetime and that I've seen Western society scared, people with fear. I've been involved with civil unrest before, and I've seen that kind of stuff and in different societies, and you saw that fear and that kind of being nervous about what you're supposed to do. I never thought I'd see that in North America. Or Europe. I just never thought I'd see that. Even through all the terrorist attacks and all those risks that we had before, people didn't change their daily life and routine. This is something that's changed the way people behave. And a lot of people behave emotionally, and it doesn't require any logic. It doesn't need to make sense because they're scared. So I think the big thing, and Rob really pointed out a few things where people are going to be nervous about going back and traveling, going on airplanes. Oh, should I go to the United States? The United States had more coronavirus than we did. Should I even go there ever again? Should I be worried about it? Is the coronavirus going to go away? All these things when it comes to people's safety and family, I think it's going to be a big step for the industry to overcome. And I think I see it as a 2 to 3 year process of getting back towards some sort of normalcy. It's sad, but I even see it. You see it in your own family. You see it in other families that people are behaving differently, and it's sad because it's something that's going to affect us all. But with good, I've noticed a couple airlines already putting out advertisements on how they're cleaning the airplanes, and the actual risk factors of flying aren't as high as people thought due to all these safety precautions put in place. So I think that it will recover. It just won't be an immediate recovery. That's how I view it. I hope it's an immediate recovery. I just think it'll take time to gain trust again of the public, not just for the airlines, but for themselves to be safe again.
And just to add on to Gray's, like initially we didn't have the scientific data. You even had the who would at one point say, oh, okay, you don't require to wear a mask. Then, okay, now you're required to wear a mask. And then for asymptomatic, okay, you can't catch COVID-19. Okay, now you're asymptomatic, you can still pass on COVID-19. We're still learning what COVID-19 is. And once we have a better grasp of that, then the whole world, not just the aviation industry, will be able to come up with a systematic approach to how we can move on. Because people want to travel. And right now, I think maybe your people, because they don't know. When we don't know the unknown, we try to, err on the side of caution. So maybe they'll just drive, maybe for this summer, Europe, North America, when you can. Some people will still have to travel to go see loved ones who are maybe, across the world. But if you don't really need to travel right now, until people really know what they're dealing with, I think they'll keep their feet on the ground until we all have a better understanding about COVID-19 and its impact.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, absolutely. Right on.
It's it's going to be interesting to see. I don't know if you guys saw that IATA put out and I think I've seen a few airlines have started focusing on this as well, about the HEPA filters on board. Yeah. Apparently, or according to them, being it limits the spread. People, there's this myth that people think that in an airplane that all the air is just circulating around, which is absolutely not true. But according to IATA, they had taken aircraft where there had been confirmed COVID-19 cases on board, and then they had tested everybody on board the aircraft to see how much the disease had spread during the flight. And what they found is that out of 100,000 passengers, there was only 2 or 3 that had been infected, and they were cabin crew. Now, obviously, I don't know the validity of that study, and I think IATA, they do a lot of great work, but they also have a vested interest in the industry recovering. So, like you said, Rob, I think there's a lot of information out there, and we're still learning. It's going to be, we don't have nearly all the answers yet, but it's going to be interesting to see how we find a good way through this.
Yeah, and Stein, just to add on, this is one thing that I have changed, since COVID-19. On the ground, usually we don't like to run the auxiliary power unit, which is the APU, because it costs fuel, green emission. But when we're using that for the air conditioning, instead of relying on an outside source, now we're bringing those HEPA filters into place that you're talking about, where it's actually, helping to purify the air. So since the COVID-19 started, this is the one thing that I'm kind of recommending as a crew that we implement. That might not be the same as the airline philosophy, but I'm doing that for safety.
Mm. That's
Make it an SOP.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, getting it out there about the actual risk. I was talking about earlier how when people are scared or they don't have enough information, they don't need to act logical or make good decisions because they're making decisions out of fear and uncertainty. Getting that information out there and getting these studies out there and telling people the actual risk of traveling on an airplane with the safety precautions that we have in place. What are the actual risks? I mean, You can go to any Costco supermarket in the Greater Toronto area and line up with 200 people. And is that higher or lower risk than going on an airplane that was disinfected with a bunch of people that have masks on, that are disinfecting their hands at all times, that are being very self-conscious? So I think it's easy for us to sit here and talk about, oh, well, it's logically not that bad. The key is getting it out there, getting to people realizing, hey, wait a sec, let's look at this logically. What are the risks in my life? How are we mitigating these risks? And is it acceptable? Instead of just everyone making decisions based on disinformation and fear, which is one of my biggest problems with the whole COVID in the first place, is anything that gets on the media, the intentions might be great, but the pathway to hell was made with great intentions. So, I mean, you just tell a bunch of people information and everyone freaks out. Well, that didn't help anybody, and making decisions like that is never a good thing. And it goes right back to the Fordak model Rob talked about. What are the facts? What are our options? And what are the real risks of what's going on? So I'm hoping that these airlines start pushing this more, because the only way we're going to stay in business and keep jobs long term is if we end up mitigating the risk, so people find it, okay, this makes sense, this is acceptable.
And we have the knowledge already to mitigate the risk with doing swab testing, seeing if the passengers has antibodies, and last thing, just before they get on the airplane, make sure they don't have a fever. If each airline uses that, there's no reason why it can't be safe, and we get back to some normalcy.
Yeah, that'll be good for everybody.
Yeah. That's a really great point. And I think, you guys all know this, that risk mitigation that's our life in aviation. We always assess the risks, try to mitigate it in the optimal way possible. Now it's just a matter of a different kind of risk that needs to be mitigated. And in this term, like you said as well, Gray, it's really important to get the message out there to inform people that consider traveling that, these are the facts. Here's some information that is useful and that you can trust. So, yeah, it's interesting to hear your guys' perspective on these things, definitely. And hopefully some of these the listeners of the show will feel more reassured if they're considering to go out flying again, which I think... Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Michelle.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, man. Sorry. I was about to say all the million listeners on our show that will be hopefully we'll be able to convince them that it's safe to fly.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about it too is, like, especially in the aviation realm, right? We're such control freaks in general. We want to control everything that goes on from the beginning to the end and make sure that we do it properly. We have risk mitigation techniques, assess, balance, communicate, all these things that we're taught to do. And we're put into a situation where it's a medical field thing, which is something, let's be honest, none of us are experts on. I mean, we've read a few documents. We've learned a few things about, like, I learned what the word epidemiologist meant. I mean, now I'm a expert on epidemiology, apparently, because I've read two things on it. And what's interesting is, yeah, because I watch CNN. I'm an expert. Yeah, and it's interesting how we're controlling things. And what I find really interesting is there's very little talk about, okay, well, we're controlling this in aviation. How are we controlling, how do you control that in every other aspect of your life? Well, I find if you think of things like that, you start realizing, hey, wait a sec, I'm exposing myself to all sorts of risks on a daily basis. And this is the one interesting thing I find with COVID is if you look at your daily risk, regardless of COVID, it's way higher for a healthy individual in the first place. So I try to say, don't be illogically scared of something. You teach your kids not to be scared of daddy long-legged spiders. The reason is because the chances of it actually harming you is almost zero. It's a natural reaction. And that's what we're doing right now. Everyone's panicked and scared. Well, wait a sec. Let's look at this. Are we going to stop driving cars? Are we going to stop eating fast food? Because for someone at my age, my biggest risk is heart attack. So there's so many risks in life, and it's like I'm hoping that we start mitigating this risk and getting back to somewhat normalcy, because the effects of this are so far-reaching. There's a report came out of British Columbia this week that the suicides and overdoses in the 3-month period of lockdown are greater than all of a 12-month period last year.
Really?
It's because people are at home, and I think the number was astonishing. Like, I mean, it's scary because we don't think of that in our society. And maybe this is a time for us to look at what our society is all about, how many drug overdoses we have, how we treat our elderly.
Yeah.
I mean,
Good point.
let's have a look at that and go, hey, wait a sec. This is we talked about how mistakes can be beneficial. Maybe that we should view this as an opportunity to reset our society and start doing things in a better way for each other.
Yeah, good point.
Well said.
Yeah, amen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this has been a really, really interesting conversation, guys. It's been a pleasure to hear about your exciting ferry flight journey, and I'm looking forward to hear more in the future. Hopefully, we'll be able to get you back on the show. When we did some pre-talk before we started recording, I said when things start opening up again, it'd be fun to have you come visit us and set this thing up in a real studio in Norway, or maybe we should head down to Spain to Michelle, where the weather is always nice.
Yeah. Absolutely. It was a pleasure having you both, and just like Stein said, it was an eye opener for both of us on your journey, on your mission, and also your thoughts about how to convince the public that, hey, it's all right to fly. All right, you don't have to be scared. But it was great, and again, it'd be great to have you again on the show. This time in our own studio, in either Norway or in Spain. That would be great to have you both. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's about time to wrap things up. Is there anything you guys would like to add here at the very end, or?
No, I would just like to say thanks for having me on and for bringing some of these points up for discussion, not only about aviation, but on COVID and how, the listeners, once they listen to this, they can actually think and get and look for data themselves, not just listening to, mass media putting propaganda out there. And maybe, obviously some of it is true, some of it is not, but we need to come to an educated decision and use all the facts. And eventually, things always come back to normal and things will be greater. Maybe it'll be in 6 months, maybe it'll be in 1 year, but we will all be flying all over the world again. The planes will be full. We'll need more pilots, especially I know there's a lot of people who just want to start flying and maybe they're scared. It is an amazing career. And if anybody's listening that wants to get into flying, I highly recommend it.
Beautiful. Well said.
Yeah, Rob, you're making me feel passionate again.
Yeah, me too, man. I got teary.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just kind of reiterate what Rob said. Like, thanks, guys, for having us. We really appreciate it. And anything we can do to share our experiences and chat. And it's big. I mean, that's the one thing I think that, for me anyways, that COVID's really taught me is making sure we keep communicating and keep the doors open. Everyone has differences, but let's just make sure we keep the doors open. I mean, it's been tough times for the last 3 months for a lot of people. So let's not forget to give our fellow person a call just to say, hey, how you doing? Because that can make all the difference in the world. So just keep in contact with your loved ones.
Yeah, good point.
Wow, what a strong finish, guys. Thanks for wrapping this episode up in the best way possible. And we look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Be safe.
Be safe. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Pilot Talk, available on iTunes, Spotify, or osmaviation.com/podcast.
Okay, that's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. And don't forget to follow the Pilot Talk podcast on Instagram for behind-the-scenes material. There you can also send us your feedback, give us ideas, ask us questions, and we're going to have competitions from time to time as well. As always, you can find our podcast on Spotify, iTunes, and Podbean. You can also tune in at osmaviation.com/podcast. And if you prefer YouTube, We've got all of our episodes uploaded to our own YouTube channel as well, which has the same name as the podcast, so easy to find. And with that, what do we say, Michelle?
Well, thank you to our guests, and blue sky.
And happy landings.
You got it. Thanks, guys. All the best. Stay safe.
Ciao.